Hello everyone, my name is Veronica Vessels and I'm a registered dietitian here to share with you my 6 tips on how to manage your picky eater. So these 6 tips that I'm going to share with you, it's not to say that these are the only tips that will help with your picky eater. It's just the ones that I have found help with my clients. So if you have more suggestions, things that have worked for your child, please list them in the comment section down below. So the first tip I have for you today is to introduce new foods every 3 to 5 days. It's very important that we make an effort to introduce new foods and not just to keep them eating familiar and favorite foods. So with that being said, it's important to introduce one new food at a time. And once they accept the food, meaning they have at least tried it 2 to 3 times, that is when we can move on to the new food or the next new food. So it's very important that we don't pressure them too much to eat the food, and that we don't bring that new food into every meal. So using broccoli, for instance, just because it's notoriously known to be the least favorite vegetable amongst children, we would introduce the broccoli in a small portion, which we will discuss later. Then we maybe put a day between the next time that we give it to them. So my second tip for you to make it easier for them is to pair the new food with a favorite food. So what I like to do is to identify the child's favorite sweet food and the child's favorite savory food. That way, when we bring new foods onto the table, we can complement the flavors, and we find their sweet food and we put a new sweet food with their favorite. We find a new savory food and we put it with their savory food. So if their favorite food is chicken nuggets, so be it, we work with chicken nuggets for that meal. We can put that bit of broccoli with the chicken nuggets. So it's very important that we continuously use different favorite and familiar foods, and that we try and move it to healthier food eating behaviors, because we can't be giving them chicken nuggets for every meal. So if we know they liked chicken in general, we can change up the chicken. If we know they like beef as well, we know we've got a few options to work with. So my third tip for you is to start small and gradually increase. It's very overwhelming for them to try a new food, so we need to make sure that we do it in a small portion. So by small portion, I mean bite size. So it's either bite size or a teaspoon, however you like to measure it. We start with that portion. Now you might have a bit of resistance coming from the child the first few times, where they might refuse to try it. Perseverance is very important with picky eaters. So introduce until that fear gradually comes down. And once they have tried the food 2 to 3 times, that is when we start bringing up the portion size gradually, but to the serving or the desired serving size. So start very small. My fourth tip for you is to be positive and patient. So the patience we've already discussed, but the positivity is very, very important. So there is a link between picky eaters and eating disorders, where there have been parents that have been very strict and negative around eating behaviors. So what actually happens is, if we punish children for not eating things, or we force them to stay at the table until they finished eating, those negative reinforcement behaviors, what happens is, when the child gets to their adolescence or their adulthood, when they've got control over their food choices, that is when we see the eating disorders creeping in. So whether it's anorexia, where they completely restrict their food intake, whether it's binging, where they overeat, all these eating disorders can be linked. I'm not saying it's definitely going to be the case, but it can be linked to the picky eaters and negative reinforcement. So try and make use of positive reinforcement, such as well done, great job, instead of punishing behaviors. Another thing that we like to do is, especially if it's a very young child, if they have a role model or someone that influences them, such as Superman or Barbie or whatever it is, link that to their food. So, for instance, if you give them carrots, you can always say, "This is what Superman eats to make him strong." And in that way, your child will be more motivated to eat that new food. Um, Another thing that you can do is once you serve the food, if they reject it and they show fear around the food, ask them, "How can I make it better for you?" Because that way they feel as though they have some decision or some input into their food. So if you say, "How can I make this better for you?" and they say tomato sauce, then you add the tomato sauce, and then they might eat it, they might not. So it's just doing this consistently, because then you can identify what it is from the eating behaviors or the foods that your child doesn't like, and then we can work around it that way. Tip number 5 is going to be making the foods visually appealing. So we as adults eat with our eyes, that's the same with children. So it's very important that we put in effort to make the dish look pretty or to make it interactive for the child. So I want to stress here that it is not the worst thing in the world for your child to interact and play with their food. That is how they learn. In terms of the appeal, you can change the food's color. Oftentimes we see children that love blue. Any and everything blue they love. So you can use food dye. Obviously we use a little bit and we bring it back, that we don't continuously dye the food. We dye it initially. Once the flavor has registered on their taste buds and they get used to that flavor, that's when we pull back the dye. Making use of cookie cutters. There's even those motivation pages on Pinterest. There's a guy that I saw now the other day, David Weir, who posts these wonderful creations on how to make a plate look visually appealing to a child. Making a lion out of fruits, making a turtle out of vegetables, all these things that really do grab a child's attention. You can even use their favorite bowl or their favorite plate, because they're more likely to eat from those than just a standard plate, a standard bowl. And then if they are a bit older and they can read, you can even accompany it with a nice message, an encouraging message, so that they at least develop positive attitudes around eating. My last tip for you, tip number 6, is to involve your child in the food preparation, the cooking, and even the serving. So children have pride in things that they make. So if you allow them to come into the kitchen to take part in the cooking themselves, they're more likely to try the food. So things like stirring the pot, cracking the eggs, mixing the ingredients, anything that is safe for your child to take part in, even if it's a buffet type service style where you tell him to go dish up for everybody, that makes it more interactive for them and they engage a lot better. With that being said, those are my 6 tips on how to manage your picky eater. I have attached the downloadable document that summarizes these 6 tips in the description box down below. So you can go get that. If you're a parent, you can print it out or even keep it on your computer to just remind you what you can do. And if you're a registered dietitian, a nutritionist, a healthcare professional, you can download this document as well, keep it in your practice or wherever you're working to help the children out. I have put my details there, so feel free to reach out to me. I've also put our Facebook group called Ask a Dietitian there as well. So I would love if you guys would join the group and interact on the group. There's plenty of dietitians from all around the world. So that's a great platform for you or as the public to ask questions and as dietitians, nutritionists to post information. I hope you guys have a great day. See you next time.